Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Apologies for a slight delay. I think we're about a minute late in starting this morning. Unfortunately, the weather has played havoc with our Wi-Fi this morning, but we're using a hotspot now, so I hope everybody is able to hear us and able to upload the slides, etc. Welcome to this Governors for Schools webinar. Coldest night of the year last night, so I'm delighted to see so many people who actually managed to join us this morning. I hope you've all had safe journeys to work or are tucked up warm in homes, so at home still. The webinar this morning, the focus is actually Ofsted, the curriculum and the consultation process that began a week or so ago. I wanted to start off really just by saying a little bit about the background to this. This is a slide, this isn't my slide, I've the bit in the pink frame in the middle, I've actually taken from an Ofsted PowerPoint. Apologies, that's why it probably looks a little bit blurred on your screen. But this is a PowerPoint that was actually part of a conference speech delivered by a gentleman called Sean Harford, who some of you may have heard of. He's the National Director of Schools for Ofsted. And he's very vociferous in social media and other aspects of the media as well, for that matter. But this is the speech he gave, and the significance of it, this was in January last year, so January 2018. And at that stage, Ofsted were already in the middle of their research on the curriculum. And I think the important thing for us to understand as governors is this isn't something that's just happened. This has been a process that's actually been going on for quite some time now. Ofsted's research actually began back in 2017, and those of you who are governors or perhaps trustees in primary schools with early years foundation stage will probably be aware that there was some curriculum research specifically looking at early years foundation stage back in 2017, and Ofsted actually produced a report then called Bold Beginnings. Wasn't without its own controversy, but we're not going to talk about that this morning, but that was part of this process. And since then, they've also done a lot of specific visits to primary and secondary schools. They've done a qualifications analysis looking at year 9 options in secondary schools. And they've also looked at level 2 qualifications in FE colleges as well. So important thing to understand here is that this isn't a one-off. This has been an ongoing piece of research, or several pieces of research, for quite some time now. And the sole aim of all of those pieces of research was for Ofsted to be able to use them to inform the new Ofsted inspection framework for schools that's due to come into place in September this year. So, sorry, for those of you that didn't hear me right at the very beginning, just to reiterate, if you want to ask any questions, I think many of you have demonstrated already you know how to use the keyboard, the dashboard rather, so please do type them in and I'll do my level best to be able to answer them for you. I just wanted to put these 3 quotes up on the side here. These are taken from Her Majesty's Chief Inspector, Amanda Spielman, who many of you will be familiar with her name. She was, or she is rather, responsible under statute to for producing a report each year, which is presented to Parliament usually in early December. Same was true this year, and it's usually accompanied by a visit to the BBC breakfast programme and a seat on the red sofa talking about it, and that was true this year as well. But the focus this year was all about the curriculum, and it was all about the forthcoming launch of the consultation. And these are just a few of the comments which I think perhaps give us as governors a flavour of where Ofsted are coming from. First one, the one on the top left of your screen there, expertise in and focus on the curriculum has waned. Now that's a very judgmental comment to make, but Ofsted clearly believe that there has been some, probably what they and people like Michael Gove would call teaching to tests has been happening over the recent years, or teaching specifically to exam specifications, etc. And Ofsted want to see if we can actually move away from that. Another comment from Amanda Spielman in the middle there, without a curriculum, a building full of teachers, leaders and pupils is not a school. So clearly saying here that the curriculum is at the heart, or should be at the heart, of everything that we do in education. And in the worst cases, teaching to the test rather than teaching the full curriculum leaves a pupil with a hollowed out and flimsy understanding. So you can see there that this is actually coming from what Ofsted would undoubtedly perceive as something of a deficit model at the moment. We have a curriculum in schools, we have a national curriculum, there are other elements of it as well, but actually it probably isn't, in some schools, delivering all that it should at this point in time. And this is really the starting point for the research that Ofsted have done, but also how that's led them to structure and conduct the consultation process that's currently underway. More of that in a few moments. But last year, 2018, we did see the very specific research that Ofsted were actually conducting. There were 3 phases to that research. Interesting. Sorry, I've just realised there's a typo on the first slide. They've actually say 11th of October 2017, not 18. Apologies for that. So the first phase was really Ofsted going into schools through Section 8 inspections, which are no specific purpose inspections, and looking at the curriculum and also using evidence gathered from regular inspections in schools as well. And the conclusion that Ofsted came up with from that first phase of the research was that some schools, and some has been described by people from Ofsted since as a significant number, no specific number attached to that in terms of percentage or proportion, but significant number of schools lacking strong curricular thinking. Now, that led Ofsted to actually develop a second phase of the research, which was actually conducted for probably the first 6-7 months of the year last year. And what that demonstrated to Ofsted, well, there were some common factors that did appear related to curriculum quality in those schools that they went to. So what they were saying is, yeah, they were still finding that a lot of schools did not have a strong curriculum or a strong thought process actually linking the curriculum together, but those that did, what was evident in those schools was that not only did they have a strong curriculum that actually linked from one academic year to the next and actually gave pupils the variety of skills, knowledge and understanding that the curriculum is intended to do, but there were common factors in those schools that led Ofsted to believe that there was something here that they could use as part of a new inspection process to identify where curriculum was actually being used in a positive way to actually drive learning in schools. And then phase 3, and the publication of the results of this was just before Christmas, so it was only on the 11th of December. And in this, the main conclusion from that was inspectors, school leaders, and of course don't forget that includes us as governors and trustees, and teachers, can have professional in-depth conversations about curriculum intent and implementation. Now that might seem like a bit of a strange phrase, but this is a bit of a clue as to where Ofsted actually believe that the future of curriculum within an inspection framework should be going. In other words, we've got some very successful schools in Ofsted's judgment in terms of their attitude to the curriculum, and where there is a strong curriculum and the curriculum is the lifeblood of teaching and learning in those schools, school leaders, including governors and other teachers, can have that dialogue with inspectors, which is all about the intent bit. Well, what are we trying to do with our curriculum? And the implementation, once we have a curriculum plan, how do we go about a thorough, methodical implementation of that across the school so it actually impacts on every single child and young person in our school? And of course, in the very best schools, you will be aware undoubtedly that as governors, we do know about the structure of our curriculum. We know what we're trying to achieve with the curriculum that we've got. We know that there is breadth and balance in it. And those are the sorts of conversations that Ofsted want to have with governors. One of the schools where I'm a governor, we actually had an inspection last week, and I was interviewed along with the chair by the HMI who led the inspection, and we were asked some very in-depth questions about our curriculum offering at the school. So this is not going to go away, I would respectfully suggest. So in terms of the impact that this research, I think will actually have on schools generally and on governance in schools specifically, and when I say governance, I mean governance in maintained schools and in academies, of course. Well, the first big impact, of course, will be that there is a new inspection framework due for schools in September this year. Now, I choose my words carefully. I say due because it is due. It does have a tendency historically to actually be delayed a little bit, but all things being well, Ofsted seem to be on stream at the moment. So come September, we will see a new inspection framework. And Amanda Spielman has actually said in a speech recently that the object of that new framework is that second bullet point on the slide in front of you now, direct quotation, to focus inspection on what children learn through the curriculum. Now you'll see when we come on to looking at the structure of the consultation at the moment, quite how that plays out in the consultation. But what Ofsted are wanting to do is say, yeah, the curriculum's important, and therefore we are going to put this at the heart of the inspection process. Now, we can't get away from the fact that Ofsted is still an acronym for the Office for Standards in Education. Therefore, standards are clearly going to be play a part here, but the curriculum is going to be the driver, it would appear. And as I say, the impact for us as governors in our own schools is that this move from Ofsted to a real clear focus on the curriculum and the impact that will have on the inspection framework is driven from some very real criticism about some current practice. Some current practice in some schools. So this isn't leveled at all schools, but I do think that one of the things that maybe we ought to think about as governors in our own schools is, could this criticism be leveled at us? Some children are having their teaching narrowed in schools in order to boost performance table points. Now, if you're a secondary governor, you may be aware that your curriculum has changed in the last few years to perhaps meet government expectations on delivery of EBAC subjects. Now, one has to ask the question, does that still enable you to offer a broad and balanced curriculum to all students, all young people, in order to meet their needs? And again, some primary schools, it appears from Ofsted, have very much narrowed the curriculum for Year 6 children on the basis that the only focus is actually on English and maths teaching, almost to the exclusion of some of the foundation subjects. Now, it's not saying that all schools are doing this, but Ofsted have certainly found evidence that that's actually happening in a lot of schools. And of course, that does actually raise some questions for us as governors. Well, do we know whether that's actually happening in our schools or not? One of the other comments which I just wanted to unpick a little bit is this one that you see on the screen here now. This is, again, taken straight from the consultation report that's come out. A rich curriculum which is taught well and leads to them achieving their all. That's the aim that Ofsted are saying all schools should have for their curriculum offering. Now, I think that raises some very obvious questions for us as governors. First one being, well, how do we know? Do we know we've got a rich curriculum? What information do we use from school leaders, from head teachers and other members of our leadership team to actually inform us whether or not that curriculum is well taught? And does the curriculum offering that we've got meet the needs of all pupils in our schools? Because if it doesn't, I think it raises a very obvious question, well, how can they all achieve their all? We might also want to ponder on what it means, that term, rich curriculum. Let me leave that thought with you for a moment, because we've got a question that's actually come up. A question from Karen. Thanks, Karen. Your question is, why have many secondary schools condensed Year 9 so there is not a broad curriculum? Instead, they're supposedly beginning GCSE teaching and therefore reducing the curriculum offer. I think that's a very good question, Karen, and there is evidence that's happened in some secondary schools. I think a lot of secondary schools will say it doesn't necessarily narrow the curriculum. In some, it actually broadens the curriculum because it does allow young people to actually get GCSEs a year earlier than they might, which then allows them to go on and study for more in the future. Again, that's my own experience from the secondary school where I'm a chair of governing body, but I think there may be other reasons for it. But certainly Year 9 is, for some young people, not too soon at all to actually start to embark on GCSE courses. It means they're completed by the end of Year 10, which means because there are now a lot of alternative short courses, you can actually bring breadth and balance back to the curriculum in Year 11. I've got another question here from Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie is saying, if we truly offered a rich curriculum as a secondary school, we would allow some of our students to do more vocational subjects, work placements, etc., and not force them down an unsuitable academic route. Yeah, that's a very valid point, Anne-Marie, and I think many of us who are involved in secondary education are concerned that, again, it's not statute, it is actually a government policy, but it's not statute. The English Baccalaureate, which of course ministers are very keen on, isn't appropriate for all pupils. There's a government target that needs to be looked at by governing bodies and by trust boards, etc. But as governors, part of our duty is to ensure that the needs of our pupils are being met. Vocational subjects still exist. Some schools are still offering them very successfully. Work placements have gone as a statutory requirement out of year 10 now. The idea is that work experiences should still be a feature of the curriculum, but it does seem to have disappeared a little bit now that its statutory nature has actually disappeared. But for some students, it is the appropriate work, and a lot of schools who do think about the offering being right for their children and young people do have alternative provision in place, which for some may be a mix of work placements, it may be a mix of vocational subjects and core subjects such as English and Maths as well. Thank you for those two comments. So coming back to my second bullet point on the slide that's in front at the moment, what's a rich curriculum? Now, historically, I think we've probably all as governors been aware of the phrase breadth, or the breadth and balance in the curriculum. But is that enough? Yeah, breadth of the curriculum presumably means that we've got a range of subject offerings that go beyond the national curriculum and reflect the interests of lots of different groups of children and young people within our schools. But the curriculum, of course, goes beyond that, and it's actually about giving children experiences beyond what's taught in the classroom. So it's worth thinking about, if you were asked as an individual governor, how rich is the curriculum in your school, would you have any evidence to be able to back that up? Does my school teach to the test? If you're in a primary school, what is the curriculum like in year 2? What's the curriculum like in year 6? Have we sacrificed breadth and balance in the curriculum, specifically in those year groups, because we are chasing all of the time that hurdle that represents achieving the age-related expectation? And in your school, what does the governing body know about the curriculum offering? I was doing some governor training with 2 schools last night, and I raised this very question with them. Many years ago, we used to, probably most schools would have had a curriculum committee that also had a finance committee, a premises one, and the staffing one. Now, thankfully, we moved away from that back in the last 10, 15 years or so. Many schools moved to a two committee model. Lots of schools still have either 2 committees, one perhaps for teaching and learning or something appropriating that, and a resources committee. Some don't have any committees at all anymore. And the only question, this isn't about what's right or wrong in terms of the structure. Each of us in our schools and our governing bodies has to have a structure that works for us. But my question is, does the curriculum ever get discussed either at governing body meetings or in a committee, whatever that committee might be called? Because it's something I think that is worthy, and it's not just worthy, I think it's absolutely fundamentally necessary to actually discuss, because as governors we are going to be expected under the new framework to know perhaps a little bit more about the curriculum than some of us may do at this point in time. So for me, it's worth reflecting, have we got a structure for governance in our school at the moment that does make it appropriate for us to have the knowledge that's going to be required on the curriculum? And if not, we might have to think about terms of reference, about structures, etc. Okay, I want to launch the first poll of this morning's webinar now, and that really links into what we've just been discussing now, this idea that do our schools, our academies, regularly look at the curriculum through governance? So governing body, governing board, whatever it's called in your particular institution, does it regularly look at the curriculum? And hopefully you should be able to see that slide in front of you now. So you've got four choices, and thank you very much, lots of you are voting already, so I'll just leave that for a few moments. Okay, so we've got about 2/3 of you, just over, voted now, so if you'd like to vote, I'll give you another couple of moments to do that, and then I'm going to put the shutters up on that particular poll and share the results with you. Okay, so we'll close the poll there, and I can share those results with you. So you ought to be able to see those results up on screen now. Interesting mix there, 36%, so the largest proportion saying, yes, we've got a designated committee. So it doesn't matter what that committee is actually called, there is a committee that within its remit, within its terms of reference, looks at the curriculum, hopefully its design, its intent, as Ofsted would call it, and how that meets the needs of pupils. 29% have said, yes, it's done through head teacher reports. And again, providing as governors, we are actually asking questions, checking our understanding, deepening our understanding then. That's perfectly acceptable in my view. 10% have said no, so clearly an action there is to maybe go back to school and ask that question, why don't we? Shouldn't we? Isn't it about time that we thought about doing this, certainly in readiness for September, if nothing else? And 25% don't know, so really the same question. If you don't know, go back and check. Hopefully the answer might be yes. If it's not, then there is clearly a suggested action that may come out of that. Okay, well, thank you for that. There's some interesting results coming out of that particular poll. And we've got one or two questions that have actually come through now. So we've got comment. This is from Ruth. Ruth is saying we look at the curriculum through a committee and through head teacher reports, so that's great. Again, it's actually what works for you in your individual schools. Comment here from Anne-Marie, if we truly offered a rich curriculum as a secondary school, we would allow some of our students to do more vocational subjects. Sorry, I've already read that one out, haven't I? Apologies, I didn't actually put that in the right box. Okay, let's move on. So, talk about the curriculum. What do we mean by the curriculum? Now, again, forgive me, I'm not trying to teach anyone to suck eggs on this slide, but just so that everybody is aware, the curriculum isn't just the national curriculum. The national curriculum is there, it's specified, it's there as an entitlement of what children and young people are entitled to learn in schools. And that is supplemented by other elements which are not part of the national curriculum but are nonetheless taught in schools. Religious education and the daily act of collective worship are part of that. They are statutory, but they're not part of the national curriculum. Similarly, personal, social and health education, it might be called something slightly different in your schools, but a variant of that also complements the national curriculum. Careers education, where relevant, of course, predominantly from secondary education. And then the two big elements which we do need to think about as governors, because these can make a very significant difference to the taught curriculum that's offered in our schools, and that's the enrichment activities. So what do we do to supplement the curriculum in the schools? So do we bring theatre groups in? Do we bring visiting scientists in? Do we have an art week or a science week or a history day? Do we celebrate International Book Day? All of those elements, they enrich the taught curriculum in the school. And then, of course, over and above that, we've got extracurricular activities. So that could be clubs, societies, organised trips, etc. But all of those, hopefully everybody can understand and appreciate, make a difference to what children and young people actually learn and experience in schools, and therefore hopefully go to what Ofsted would refer to as go towards achieving their all. So in other words, it's about shaping children and young people to be the responsible young adults we want them all to turn into. And that is about experiences as well as just what we study in the classroom, etc. So that's, apart from anything else, just a reference slide there for you. So we're moving on now just to think about the inspection framework and the consultation process into what that framework might look like. I'm sure many of you will be aware that this process was actually kicked off on the 16th of January, and it's got quite a long period until the close of the process. That big red 5th of April there, I've dropped that in, that's not on the DfE website. That's just a reminder for everybody that the consultation does extend until the 5th of February. So that does give us, as governing bodies, as trust boards, as schools, an opportunity to think about these proposals in detail. And there's a lot of information to actually be taken in the proposals, it has to be said. I wouldn't necessarily recommend them as bedtime reading to anybody unless you have difficulty getting to sleep at night. I have read them from cover to cover. I believe they're fascinating and they're actually very interesting. It will mark a step to change, it would appear, as far as inspection from September onwards, assuming the new framework does come into effect then, what that actually looks like and what our experiences of Ofsted may be going forward. So what's the consultation actually all about? Well, these are some comments that have actually come from the press release, which was actually issued at the same time as the consultation document on the 16th of January. And Ofsted is saying here what they want to do is focus inspection on what children learn through the curriculum rather than over-reliance on performance data. So again, we're coming back to the thing, are we teaching children to the test? Are we teaching children to a syllabus to get a national qualification, etc.? Or are we offering a rich and highly developed curriculum pathway that actually enables them to get good attainment, good marks in tests and public examinations, but at the same time delivers a much broader curriculum to them? So Ofsted is saying what they want the framework to actually herald is an end of teaching to the test and also an end to off-rolling. Now, I think many of you will be aware of what off-rolling is. Off-rolling is that term that's actually been coined by Ofsted, where schools are persuading children and their families to withdraw from the school and be home educated. The reason for that is if a parent or a child actually opts to be home educated, then they are removed from the school roll and their performance in any tests or public examinations is no longer attributed to the school. If the school permanently excludes a pupil, they retain their performance data. It still counts in that school's performance and could impact on their position in league tables. So there has been an assertion from Ofsted that's been around now for a good 7 or 8 months that many schools were using rather underhand and very dubiously legal, questioned from a legal perspective, tactics to persuade people to withdraw from school and be home educated. A lot of this happening in years 10 and 11. There was even some evidence that this was beginning to happen in the year 6s in some schools as well. Now, if you've not heard about this before, it's a good idea to go back and check and ask in your schools, ask your head teachers to share with you how many children have elected to be, or how many families have elected for their children to be home educated in our school in the last 12 months. It should be a tiny number, if any at all. If it's a number over 10 in any school, irrespective of the size, governors should be asking some slightly more deeper questions about that, I would suggest. Okay, we have a question coming in here from Tracy, and Tracy's question is, how will the huge cuts in the special educational needs and disability budget and provision affect and impact on the pressures on schools to off-roll? I think that's a very difficult one to actually answer, Tracy. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a governor in 5 schools at the moment, and I know, because I've actually seen the evidence, that none of my schools are involved in off-rolling. So I would like to think that everybody who is working in schools, from head teachers down, but actually each and every one of us who are governors or trustees, would actually have as absolutely central to everything that we think and do in our schools, that this is about meeting children's needs. It's not about league tables. Yes, it's nice. It's an added bonus to be in the higher part of the league tables, I guess. But do we really want that if we've actually deliberately engineered a situation where we've denied some of our most vulnerable pupils access to education? That's not why I'm a governor, and I certainly would not be a governor in a school that did that. So I hope that, sorry, I feel like I've got on my soapbox on that one, Tracy, apologies, but I hope I'm preaching to the converted on that. There's a quick question here from Hadiza. Do we get a recorded version of this webinar after the session? Governors for Schools do actually edit all of the webinars after they finish and put them up on the website. So yes, as I said, that should be up there. May not be this week, it may be the early part of next week before you see that, but Hadiza, it will actually be there. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. What we've also got as a central point to the consultation is a new separate behaviour judgment. Now, interestingly, as I say, these comments all come from the press release that accompanied the launch of the consultation. So this isn't just aimed at people in schools, this is aimed at parents as well. And Ofsted, of course, are always mindful that Ofsted see that one of the main audiences, if not the main audience for the outcomes of inspections, as parents. They want parents to have information that informs choices that they make about their children's schools. So a new separate behaviour judgment, and the rationale that Ofsted give here, to give parents reassurance that behaviour is good. So say a little bit more about that in a few moments, but that will represent certainly a deviation from the existing framework, although some of you who've been governors for some time may recognise that there was a standalone behaviour judgment many years ago. And the last point that Ofsted are making is that this framework, if it goes ahead after the consultation without too much deviation from the current proposals, will be the most evidence-based, research-informed and tested framework in the whole of Ofsted's existence. And Ofsted have been around for 26 years now. So I think Ofsted are trying to make the point here that this is a framework that has absolutely evolved. It's not revolutionary in many ways, but it's evolved based on evidence. And of course, there are lots of calls in education for evidence to be used to inform more of the decisions that actually affect schools and governance. So hopefully, Ofsted are actually trying to make the point here that this should be seen in a positive light. Excuse me. Okay. So the proposals themselves, probably the most significant change is that there is going to be a new what's called quality of education judgment. Now the quality of education judgment is actually going to replace, in the current framework, we have something called the quality of teaching, learning and assessment. That's going to disappear and actually be replaced by this quality of education judgment. And there will also, as you can see on that second bullet point there won't be an outcomes judgment. So outcomes are judged separately at the moment. They will also be incorporated within that quality of education judgment. Now, probably a slight health warning for me on this one. As I said at the beginning, we can't get away from the fact that Ofsted is still an acronym for the Office for Standards in Education. So standards have to be part of what Ofsted look at. What that pans out to be in the fullness of time under whatever framework we get in September actually remains to look like, but it will not be far away from everything we do. So I wouldn't put the put the party bunting out yet to celebrate that Ofsted aren't going to be judging outcomes anymore. I think what this is saying is that outcomes will be considered within the context of how does the quality of education inform them. So as I say, at the moment, we have a judgment which incorporates personal development, behaviour and well-being. What we're going to get in the new framework, if the proposals are accepted, is two separate judgments, one on personal development and another one on behaviour and attitudes. Now, the personal development one, of course, there are elements of, how happy are children, how safe are they, what's the extent of spiritual, moral, social and cultural education. There'll be a piece about mental health in there without any doubt whatsoever. But that is completely separate from the behaviour and attitudes judgment. So those are going to be two standalone judgments, and certainly it's worth looking at the consultation materials, because one of the things that Ofsted have actually done is produced already what they would see as a draft inspection handbook. So the document that inspectors use in terms of informing their judgment, it lays out exactly the evidence they should be seeking. It lays out what the characteristics of each of the respective judgments are. And when I say respective judgments, I mean the judgments in terms of outstanding, good, requires improvement or inadequate. So those are there already on the website. You can download all of these documents, and these are the things that I think schools, including governors, need to look at, need to think about, and hopefully use to inform response to the consultation document. But particularly on that behaviour and attitudes judgment, it's worth looking at that, because I think that again has implications for us as governors going forward in terms of what we monitor through our own existing structures. We've also got a change in the way in which short inspections are actually going to be conducted under the new framework. They will move from 1 day, which is the current setup, to 2 days, and there will be a particular focus in that 2 days on very specific aspects of provision in the school, and those will be drawn principally from that quality of education judgment. Now, as it is at the moment, those short inspections, or Section 8 inspections as they're called, they vary, there's no set pattern for them, they vary tremendously from school to school, and they will be driven, the evidence trails that Ofsted are seeking will be driven by the school's previous inspection report, but also what the data and other indicators are saying. So that's why it says here, there will be a focus on particular aspects being drawn from. So they won't say exactly what they're going to be, but they will actually draw them from the inspection framework for a full Section 5 inspection. Okay, the other thing I wanted to actually just run through was this idea that there's three words that Ofsted have introduced into the inspection lexicon, or certainly the curriculum part of that lexicon in the last few months. And that really has come out of the research, and right from the very early days, going back to 2017. And what Ofsted have done is actually pulled up these three words: intent, implement, and impact. And they are going to be using them, and you will see if you look at the draft consultation documents, they're going to be using them throughout the framework, particularly on the quality of education judgment, to inform the judgments that they make. So the three component parts, and each one of those has its own grade descriptors or characteristics for outstanding, good, requires improvement, etc., in the framework. And I think the important part for us to understand as governors is, well, what does that actually mean to us? What do we understand by intent? Do we realise that there should be some kind of vision for the curriculum in our schools? What are we trying to achieve with our curriculum? And if we say we want the curriculum to meet the needs of all pupils, well, what does that actually look like in reality? The implement phase, obviously, or the implementation phase, is, well, how does the school then go about making those plans a reality? And that will include, of course, considerations of things like, well, how is progression built into the curriculum? Do we actually have a clear pathway from year 1 through to year 6, or from year 7 through to year 9? Those sorts of considerations. So are we building skills and knowledge for children in a logical way, but still keeping their interest, still keeping their motivation, etc.? And of course, impact comes back to standards, doesn't it, at the end of the day, because the quality of any curriculum, the quality of education generally, and so will be judged on the outcomes, and the outcomes, of course, will be driven by pupil performance. Okay, so we've got a couple of other questions coming in here. One from Rebecca, and Rebecca's saying, isn't the definition of these words slightly judgmental in itself, so the judgment can vary even with the scoring? Do you mean intent, implement, and impact? Are those the words that you're talking about, Rebecca? If you just give me a quick what? Yes, lovely. Thank you very much. You anticipated my question perfectly. Yeah, to an extent, I think they are. But when you actually look at the judgment characteristics, it does spell out what Ofsted believe that they would be looking at. So, for example, page 47 of the new draft handbook. There's a section on that page that says sources of evidence specific to curriculum impact. And it then goes into that, inspectors will gather evidence of the impact of the quality of education from the following sources. Now, there will be some professional discretion here, I am sure, but one of the sources, surprise, surprise, on impact, nationally generated performance indicators. So there'll still be ASP, analysing school performance, there'll still be the inspection data summary report, they're specifically mentioned. They're also talking about first-hand evidence, how pupils are doing, drawing together evidence from the interviews, observations, work scrutinies, listening to pupils read in primary schools, discussions with pupils about what they've remembered, about the content of what they've studied. So there's a fairly broad, I mean, there are only so many ways that one can do this, but yeah, I think they are judgmental terms. There's no way of getting about that, and I'm a pedant. There's no question of that. I think they're interesting words. They're interesting choices of words, but they are. Yeah, let's not lose sight of that. Ofsted is about making judgments, so I don't think we're going to get away from that. But I think that is a good observation. Thank you. Michelle has asked a question: How long inspection section 5? Sorry, how will the long inspection? Sorry, how will the long inspection in section 5 change if short inspections are now 2 days? The Section 5, the full inspection, will still be 2 days. However, the plan is that inspectors will arrive in school the day before. Now, the wording on this is actually quite interesting. So the idea will be for Section 5s that school will receive a telephone call at about 10:30 in the morning, and the lead inspector, maybe an HMI, is saying, I'm arriving at your school with my team, if there is a team, just after lunch, and we'll do our preparation work in the school this afternoon. Now, the inspection doesn't officially start until I think it's 8 o'clock the following morning, and will still be the 2 days that it is at the moment. That's one that I'm not convinced is actually going to go down particularly well with the teaching associations, teaching unions and head teacher associations. So I think that's one to watch, and certainly if you have views on that, something you might want to encourage your own school to actually respond to. Got a comment here from Nick. Intent, implementation of impact have always been commented on by Ofsted, but in a structured way as per the proposed framework. Yes, I think they have, not using those words, Nick, but I think there has always been, something about the curriculum under leadership and management in the existing framework. I think the focus of this is to say it's going to be a much sharper, much more focused spotlight on the curriculum and the difference that it actually makes. I don't think many Ofsted inspections have actually focused on the vision or rationale for the curriculum and what it was actually aiming to do. I think it's been taken as a given historically, but yeah, take your point totally on that. Okay, well that brings me to the second poll I want to actually launch for the session this morning, and the question for this second poll you can hopefully see is actually on your screen now, and has your governing body or trust board discussed curriculum intent, implementation and impact? And I'm going to launch that poll now, so hopefully you all will be able to see that. Again, there are 4 potential answers there, so please make your choice. I can see a few people are doing that already. Okay, so I'll give you a few more moments there. If you want to vote, now is your chance. Okay, so I think most people have actually voted now, so I am now going to close that poll and share those results with you. So hopefully you can see that bar chart that's appeared on your screens now. A bit of a mixed picture here. Yes, we've got a designated committee, and what we mean by that, a designated committee looking at curriculum, and it's being considered there. 18% of you have said that. 16% have said no, but it's on this term's agenda. That's great. I hope that's because you listened to one of our Hot Topics broadcasts and we're actually aware of it because of that. 27% of you said no, and 38% don't know. So again, I think for me, probably that ought to be a little bit of a prompt. Over 60% of you are not talking about it right now. It's something that should be certainly talked about this term with a view to responding to the consultation, I would suggest. But actually, the most important imperative is what's this going to do to actually change the way in which we look at curriculum as a governing body, as a trust board going forward. Okay, so I'll get rid of those results now. Let's move on. So in terms of actions going forward as a result of what's happening with the curriculum and with Ofsted, I would suggest it's worth having a look at the research. I mean, particularly phase 3. Phase 3, one of the things it did, which I think was actually incredibly helpful, was produce a list of 25 characteristics, I believe, no, factors, I think they refer to them as, which could inform the way in which Ofsted make their judgments. Now, it's always helpful for everybody in schools, from head teachers and the rest of leadership teams, and us as governors, to know how Ofsted actually make their judgments. And the idea is that these factors identify where Ofsted has seen very good practice and therefore ought to help them inform judgments about whatever practice is looking like in schools. So it's well worth having a look at that research project from phase 3, looking at those characteristics, and you will see 2 or 3 of them do mention governance specifically. So the intention, without any doubt whatsoever in my mind here, is to up the ante on expectations of what governors know about the curriculum, its design, its implementation across the school, and of course, most importantly, what difference it makes. Consultation is crucial. This will affect every single school, and even if you're sitting there as a governor in an outstanding school at the moment, one of the things that's actually being talked about by the Secretary of State at the moment is that he has a view that too many schools haven't been inspected for too long a period of time. Now, at the moment, Ofsted actually sample, I think it's 10% of schools each year who are judged outstanding and therefore exempt from regular or routine inspection. there is a move within the department. We hear rumours that they want that increased so that there are more schools that have been inspected more regularly. And many of you will know there are outstanding schools out there that haven't been inspected for 10 and sometimes 12 years now. And I think the government view, and certainly Ofsted view, would be, how does that inform parental choice? Yes, standards may well be good, but other things may not be. And if you looked at or have heard anything of Amanda Spielman, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector, her report last year, one of the things that she did comment on specifically about governance in that report, and there wasn't much about governance in it, was that in schools that had previously been judged outstanding, when they had been inspected and had actually then been judged inadequate, and there were a number of them, one of the things that very often was a casualty is that governors weren't aware of what was going on the ground in their schools. So governors weren't close enough to safeguarding, they weren't close enough to provision for special educational needs and disabilities, etc. Now, top-line standards, as represented by the published data in the league tables, may still be there, but as far as other aspects of provision, certainly personal development, well-being, etc., they most certainly were not in place. I'm just seeing we've got a comment. Okay, just a comment come through from Alison here. Thank you, Alison. Alison's just saying curriculum discussions takes place within a small working group within the school, and then they make recommendations to the full governing body. So that's a comment referencing the last poll, isn't it? So thank you for that, Alison. So again, think about response. You've got until early April to do that. So I do think it's there's plenty of time there, and hopefully not many of you will have had meetings this term to actually do that. But certainly check that your head teachers and leadership team are aware of the consultation. I'm sure there can't be many out there who are not. Reflect on intent, implement, and impact. As I say, if you've not already done that, and again, the poll tends to indicate that quite a few haven't, or the majority haven't, so that's something to do. And also think about, does this say that it's time for us to actually hold the mirror up to ourselves as a governing body, think about our own structures, think about, are we geared up at the moment to arm us as governors with access to information that makes sure that we are sufficiently knowledgeable on those elements of the curriculum. I've got a comment comes through here from Tara. Tara saying, schools are naturally cautious about contact governors have with daily school activity and processes, particularly in direct contact with learners. Do you have any comments regarding this? Schools are naturally cautious. That's an interesting comment, Tara, I would say. My view is that as governors, we have to recognise that part of our role is monitoring the work of the school. That's how we demonstrate our accountability. Within that, I mean, I was talking about this, as I say, last night as well. The Pareto principle, 80-20, well, it's not even Pareto, it's more than that. 95% 5 is probably the relationship. 95% of all of our monitoring as governors is actually receiving monitoring that others have done on our behalf. So it might be performance data, it might be financial monitoring reports, it might be a head teacher report, subject leader report, safeguarding audit, all of those things that we read, all of the things that we do ourselves in terms of our own personal development make us more effective as governors. However, that 5%, and again, it's not hard and fast rule 5%, but it's probably about accurate. That should be informed by our own direct experience of going into school. So it is absolutely vital. And with the greatest respect, a lot of my friends, I work with many, many head teachers and have over the years, a lot of my friends are heads, with the greatest respect to all of them, any head teacher that says governors are not welcome and we need to be a bit cautious about allowing them into school doesn't get it, in my view. We should be making visits, we should be making focus visits. I'm not suggesting we all have free access to turn up any time we want, but visits are, if you like, the cherry on the cake. That's what makes the difference, and that's what makes me hopefully a better informed governor than I might already be. Okay, well, I think that just about brings me to the end of what I wanted to say this morning, folks, but just to give you the opportunity, if there are any questions that haven't been asked at this stage, now is your opportunity. Okay, I don't see many people coming through with questions at the moment, so I'll ramble on for a few minutes and just see if anything comes up. some people make some very nice comments on screen. That's lovely. I won't read those out. But just to say, I hope you've actually found the session this morning useful. If there are any other questions, I will come back to those in just a few moments. But if you're not already registered with Better Governor, please think about doing it. The link is actually on the last slide. It's free to register, and that gives you access to all of the articles that we publish on a regular basis. And hopefully they are about keeping us all as governors actually informed in a timely basis in terms of preparing us for our meetings and actually making us more effective as governors. Got a question here from Karen. Karen is saying, if a school has bought and purchased a curriculum, is it enough? I think that's a very good question to ask. There are, I mean, I think you can't buy the whole curriculum. You can buy bits of it, so you can buy. I'm not promoting this at all, but it just happens to be a name I'm familiar with because my wife's a teacher. But there's a company called Hamilton that produce a maths scheme or a literacy scheme, etc., for primary schools. I think it's perfectly fine to source resources wherever schools want to, but the question we should be asking as governors is absolutely the last part of your question there, Karen. Is that enough? Is it sufficient? Does it meet the needs of the national curriculum? Have we tested it ourselves? Are we going to adapt it? How are we going to perhaps enrich it by bringing in other elements, etc.? So no, I think that's a good question to ask, and certainly one that we should have uppermost in our mind. Sue is asking a question here. With you and Ofsted, do you think they will incorporate some of these principles? Well, there are some pilot inspections going on. They've already gone on, and they will continue to go on through this process. So it's hard to see. I mean, I'm guessing it's probably a little bit soon yet to see this actually informing the training that all inspectors will have. But you might get one of Her Majesty's inspectors, one of the more senior people who have been part of it. And yes, it is going to inform their thinking. As I said to you, inspection that I was interviewed for last week in one of the schools where I'm a governor, we were absolutely asked about the curriculum. So yeah, I think human nature as it is, it will creep in. And of course, the curriculum is, forgive me, I think it was Nick actually mentioned earlier, the curriculum is already on the framework. I think this is just about the extent of it, so it's not going to go away, absolutely not. Maria is asking, do we know when Ofsted will publish the results of the consultation? No, we don't. I don't think they ever announce when they will do that. But again, we know what the timeline is. They want a new framework in place for September. My guess is that it will be a fairly, relatively quick turnaround, and we will probably get the materials published sometime in July. That's what's tended to happen historically. Dan is making a point here. Behaviour judgment should be a two-way street between parents and teachers. Yeah, that's an interesting comment, Dan. Yes, I think it should be. And of course, don't forget the parent view is still here. That's Ofsted's online questionnaire, and it is still a requirement of all governing bodies in academies and maintained schools to issue that or remind parents to go online and actually complete it once they know an inspection is actually taking place. And of course, that does actually ask parents what their views on behaviour, bullying and various aspects of that are in the school. Jane is asking, where can we find the inspection handbook? I didn't put the URLs onto the PowerPoint this morning because they're so long it would have taken up a whole slide, Jane. But the easy way to do it, whatever your preferred search engine, if you just type in the words Ofsted and consultation, I guarantee it will be the first result you find. So go into that, and you will, if you scroll down, the first one you'll find will be the press release. You scroll down in there, and one of the hyperlinks that comes up says inspection handbook. That's the document that you want. Okay, I think we seem to have come to. We've got one more question here. Iram was actually asking, tell us how to keep motivation. If only I could, Iram. Motivation should come out of success. Motivation, the best way to be motivated about your role as a governor, if that's what you're specifically meaning, is go into your school and talk to children and young people, because that's what it's really all about, and it helps me every time I go in, I can assure you. So I hope that works for you too. Okay, we have actually run out of time now, folks, so I just want to say thank you very much for the questions. I'm sorry about the slight technical glitches at the top of the session this morning. I hope that didn't detract too much away from how useful you found it. Please, if you wouldn't mind filling the evaluation questionnaire, there's only 4 quick questions on there. That helps us, and if you've got any ideas, any suggestions on how we can improve these webinars for you, then please do get back to us and let us know.
Other than that, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, and if you're on the roads, drive carefully. Thank you very much.